I just got this Charvel DK24 in red ash. It runs about $1,200 and it's made in Korea. Most, if not all, of the other DK24 models are made in Mexico. I'm not really sure why this model is made in Korea. Maybe it's the availability of this wood. That's just speculation. There is about a $200 difference, an upcharge for this guitar versus all of the models made in Mexico. But it's nowhere near the cost of the Guthrie Govan, which is about 3 times as much. Let me cut to the chase before I get into the details of the guitar and kind of stack it up against the Guthrie Govan model. I am very happy with this purchase. It is an excellent guitar. I've been playing it for about a week now, and I got really used to it, got really comfortable with it. And then after about a week, I picked up the Guthrie Govan guitar, and while I could immediately tell that the Govan guitar is perfect, it's such a high quality guitar, it didn't detract at all from this guitar's abilities. In fact, there's really nothing that I can do on a Guthrie Govan guitar that I can't do on this guitar. So it's not a matter of this being able to, hinder me or propel me in any way whatsoever. It's just a different guitar. Let's start at the top of each guitar and work our way down. The tuners on the DK24 are Charvel branded tuners with a locking mechanism. They work great. They opted to put string trees on the top 4 strings of the DK24. I haven't gotten around to seeing if I can take those off yet. Normally, I will take them off because they add friction to the string and it can kind of hurt your tuning stability, I've found, especially when you use a tremolo. So whether you can take those off or not are really a question of how much the break angle is over the nut. Because once you take them off, it raises the string a little bit, and that could result in the string slipping out of the nut. The nut itself on a DK24 is a tusk nut. It's perfectly adequate. I would have liked to have seen a little better finish on it. The nut is offset. I can feel it kind of sticking out over here, and it's recessed over here. But it's cut well, and it's not giving me any problems with intonation or string action. Here's the Govan model. Yeah, it still has locking tuners, the same design, except these are Spertzl branded. I assume that's just what Guthrie himself prefers, but they work pretty much the same way. As you can see, there are no string trees. That's not because I took any off. The guitar just didn't come with any, and it works fine. So the nut on this guitar is bone, and it's flawless. The person who put this guitar together, the craftsman, I should say, who put this guitar together, just made it perfect. Now, because it's bone, it does have a bit more friction. I think I heard Govan say that he prefers bone. There's something about the tone that he likes. You could end up with some tuning stability problems, and I have experienced that. Guthrie uses, nut sauce, as the lubricant to help with tuning stability. I like to use gun cleaning graphite, and you can see that there. It makes a bit of a mess. I don't really care. Some people might not like that because they're so focused on the resale value of a guitar, but I buy guitars I want to keep, so that's not really a factor. Back to the DK24, the frets are jumbo. Charvel doesn't list them as being either nickel or steel, which I assume means they're nickel. The Govan, on the other hand, is a jumbo fret, which they specifically say is stainless steel. The necks on both guitar are what Charvel call caramelized maple, which is also known as roasted maple. This one, the DK24, the fretboard is actually glued on to the rest of the neck, unlike the Govan, which is one solid piece of maple. One, I guess you could say, is a bit unfortunate, and I've noticed this in a lot of the red ash models, is there's a discoloration of the roasted maple. And this particular one, it looks good. Let's see if I can get this. It looks good, pretty much right down the length of the neck until you get towards the headstock. And then the coloration begins to change. And you can really tell by looking at the front of the guitar that it's very different hue than the rest of the neck. Like the Govan model, the DK24 has the lumen lay side dots, which glow in the dark, which is really handy. I've had the Govan on stage and the lights go out in the middle of a song, And while, most things I can play just by feeling my way around, yeah, you can be in the middle of a piece that really requires concentration and vision on the neck. And yeah, I'd rather have them there than not. So last word about the neck, the dimensions compared to the Govan model. Every dimension is pretty much identical, except for the width of the neck. Let's see here. I don't know if this is really going to come across in a video, but the neck on the DK24 is a bit thinner than the Govan model. I wouldn't call it a thin neck, not by any stretch. It's a good size neck. It's really comfortable. I prefer a neck to be just a little fatter, so that edges me towards the Govan model. But I adapted to the dimensions of this neck no problem. Didn't take me any time at all. Back to the Govan model, for those points I just discussed, it has the stainless steel frets. Of course, the neck is a brilliant looking piece of flame maple. I've noticed most of the Govan guitars have just an outstanding cosmetically perfect piece of flame maple. Let's see if I can, well, we'll talk about the dimensions of the neck, but first the lumen lay side dots are the same. And it's a little tricky here to get this image just right, and I don't know how well it's going to come across on a video, but here is a shot of the thickness of the Govan neck. And I think you can probably tell it's a little thicker. It's not enough to keep me awake at night. Examining the body of both guitars, they are shaped differently. The DK24, of course, DK stands for dinky, which is a cute way of saying it's a shaved down Stratocaster body, which was really popular in the 80s with shred players, and it has a more aggressive modern styling. The Govan, which I'll put up here in a second, is the San Dimas body shape, which is a rounder, a little girthier, more traditional Strat shape. Charvel says the finish on both guitars is satin. Yeah, and I'm no expert on finishes, but there's some kind of difference between the two guitars. The DK24 really just absorbs the light. I know in video, it's the video's doing its job at trying to grab as much light as possible and make a sharp image, but I'm looking right down on the guitar and it just looks flat. It looks like there's no finish on it. It looks like it's just a stained piece of wood. While the Govan, and we'll throw that up here in a second, does reflect light and has a little bit of a, even though it feels like satin, it's you can tell there's a finish on it just by looking at it. And the wood of the guitar, both of them are ash, but there's again a pretty drastic difference between the ash used on both guitars. And now I'm not even a woodworker, so I don't know what this difference is, and I don't know if there's a process that does this, but the groove of the grain on this guitar is very deep. Like you can just run your finger over and it feels like you're running over valleys or something. When I first put the guitar on, in fact, this area over the armrest, like I could feel that. It was actually kind of irritating on my forearm while I played. Now, I tuned that out after about a day. It doesn't really bother me now. But yeah, at first it stood out to me in a big way. Another cool thing about the deepness of these grooves, or the grain, is the way it picks up the stain. Like right here, you can see the the darker red areas where the grain seems to have maybe picked up more, or there's a shadow being cast or something. But as you look at it at an angle, you can start to see the beige of the wood peek through. So depending on how you're looking at the guitar, it's got kind of a different looking finish on it. And I think that was probably intentional. And I don't know if that's something you do in the cutting or the drying of the wood, or it's just the wood itself, but I'm not hating it. It's actually pretty cool. And here's the Govan on those same topics. Yeah, you can see like right away I can tell that the finish has a bit more reflection on it. And I think if you look at it on one of the corners, like you can see that there's just a bit more of a shine going on. Yeah, so this is the San Dimas body shape, like I was saying. It's a little more round, and And lastly, the grain, you can feel it just slightly, but it's nowhere near as drastic as the DK24. And, you know, turning it on its edge is not going to do anything. Before I discuss the pickups in the guitar, let me just say I know some of you might be disappointed that I didn't do the type of video where I sit there and I flip to each position to show you how it sounds between this guitar and another guitar. You know, the reason I didn't do that, I am not one of these super versatile guitar players who just has a category of licks and improvisations of styles that suit every pickup playing position. What you heard in the beginning of the video is pretty much me. I use different pickup positions, but they're more of just a coloration of what I do, where I think a lot of people who are much better at demoing different styles on a guitar should just handle that. And by the way, there are plenty of videos of DK24s with the HSS configuration out there with all the pickup positions. So please go seek out one of those if you want to hear all those variations. So the bridge humbucker, it's a Seymour Duncan full shred. Now, the Govan pickups are completely unique to that guitar. They're custom made, and I love them. They are fantastic. In fact, I have a couple other guitars where I wanted to use them as backup, and I wanted to have a bridge pickup similar to the Govan. So I went through a bit of a buying spree, and I got Seymour Duncan JBs. I got a Seymour Duncan Custom, something like that. And I put both those in two different guitars, and I use them and I like them, but they didn't quite, you know, get to the Guthrie Govan level of output and also just frequency response. The Govan pickup has, to me, it's perfect. It's got the right amount of bass. It's got a tight bass. It's got a smooth top end, and can sound aggressive with the right distortion pedals. And yeah, it's just great. But back to the DK24. So this is the full shred. And had I known that this was the pickup I was looking for, I could have saved myself some time. This pickup, to me, is the closest I have gotten to a bridge pickup matching the Govan pickup. In fact, it's so close that I've done some recording tests between them, and I can't tell all that much of a difference. There's a slight difference. I think this one may not have quite the same bottom end, but it's way closer to my ears than a JB or the Custom. The single coils are the Duncan flat strats, and I think they're great. They pair very well with the full shred. So the other electronics, the controls, you know, the 5-way switch is pretty typical for Charvel. Full bridge humbucker, one of the coils of the bridge humbucker in the middle. Position 3 is one of the coils of the bridge humbucker in the neck, which is becoming really popular, I notice, on a lot of guitars out of factories, whereas position 3 on a Strat is typically just the middle one. But for years, for decades, I've literally always rewired my Strats to have position 3 be the bridge in the neck. I like that sound more, and I don't really like to modify guitars after I buy them, so I'm really happy that this is a more common choice coming off the line. And then, of course, you know, next position would be the middle and the neck, and the neck. So that just leaves us with the volume and the tone. The volume is one of the EVH like low friction pots. It's really nice. I think it's the same one that you get on the Govan, which that was a revelation for me on the Govan. I really love that. It moves so easily that it actually takes a little getting used to. On all my other guitars, I had to put a certain amount of, you know, there's a certain amount of muscle memory that you get into, because I do change the volume a lot when I play. And I tend to go between fully open or down to 7 or down to 3. And the muscle memory like gets me there really fast. And then I got the Govan guitar, and it seemed like I just touched it and it jumped down to 1, and it took a little while to kind of change my muscle memory. This guitar has that same thing. And the one downside, I think, of this guitar, and a place where I think they might have cut a corner, is the tone knob. It just feels really cheap. It's doing its job, and it does change the tone of the guitar nicely, but you can tell that it's just not the same level of quality pot as the volume knob. So the Govan pickups, wow, what can I say? You only find them on this guitar, and they are outstanding. I wish I had like a cheat sheet to tell me what aftermarket pickups might sound close to these. I've had this guitar open and I closed it up immediately because I just didn't even understand what I was looking at. There's like a circuit board in there, but there's no there's no power. You know, these are passive pickups, so whatever they have going in there, it's working, and I love it. You know, I won't go over it, but you know, the switches, the 5-way switch works a lot like the way it works on the DK24, with the addition of a bit of a mini toggle here, which the way they describe it is it's a vintage versus modern sound on the bridge humbucker. I think of it just as kind of a coil tap or coil split, frankly. It might be parallel serial, I don't know. But when I flip it, it gives me a really good approximation of a bridge single coil sound. The control knobs are excellent. They're both the same. They have the same feel to them. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Let me lift the guitar a little bit. It's one of the cool things that that I got on the Govan I didn't expect, which I wish more guitar. This is definitely something Govan had them do. This is what a guitar player would think of. There's a little bit of a post embedded into the wood right there, and it's both in the tone control and the volume. And it's just what it is. It's a little, it's like a hash mark where you can, it's a reference point. So if you align it to, like right now, it's perfectly aligned with the 10 setting as the knob is fully up, and there's a nice way to actually know that you've gone down by half or whatever. And also another interesting thing is the numbers on the knobs are actually luminlay, so they glow in the dark as well. So yeah, hats off to Guthrie Govan for coming up with some really cool small touches that I think only a guitar player playing on a large stage every night would come up with. Well, the last thing to discuss is the bridge. This is the 2-point floating bridge. It's recessed into the body. It's by Godot, and it's I think it's the 510 model. Yeah, there's not a lot to say about it. It works great. It's simple, and you know, I think if you saw the intro video, I used it a bit, and I even did a little spring, the flutter or whatever they call it. Yeah, it's really, it doesn't overtick the plumbing. Some bridges get way too fancy for me. I started on Floyd Rose's and with the fine tuners and the lockers, and I moved away from that because I didn't want to take so much time restringing my guitar. And once I really got accustomed to how to really set up a guitar nicely and wind up the strings perfectly and make sure there's like no extra friction points in the nut and the string trees, I just I stopped seeing the need for any locking mechanisms at the nut or at the bridge. So having just said that, here's the Govan, and it has locking tremolo. So this is the only tremolo I have that has locking saddles, and I did start that way. So there is actually, when I got this, it was a bit of a nostalgia factor. I did recognize that I was really comfortable with the way palm muting works with these saddle shapes, and just the mass of the bridge is different from like the DK24. You can see, let me put them up real close to each other. The DK24 bridge is much more narrow, much less mass, and I think that mass on the Govan and the Floyd Roses in general does help with a few things like flutter, and it also just feels different. It has a different action to it. It doesn't really change the way I sound when I play either one, but I do recognize that there are certain preferences in the way something feels when you play it, and I will say I do prefer the feel of this tremolo. There are a lot of things that I think are objectively better on this guitar. Somebody obviously spent more time dialing it in. That money on an expensive guitar is less about the wood and the parts. It's more about the labor and the craftsmanship and the person putting it together and not letting it go out the door until it's absolutely perfect. And that is reflected in this guitar. In fact, I have to go back a second and just talk about the bridge on this DK24. Before I got this guitar, I saw some videos about other DK24s, and one of them was mentioning tuning instability. And the guy said he had discovered that these posts have an inner screw for tightening the the post so that it can't turn. And he said he found out that those inner screws, those inner Allen wrench posts were loose. And immediately when I got this guitar, I went and checked that, and sure enough, they were loose. So if you are thinking about buying one of these guitars, get that little Allen wrench out of the bag, put it into that hole, and see if there's any play. If there is, tighten it down. It's supposed to be tight, and I don't know why that was left out at the factory, but it kind of goes to what I'm saying. The difference in expense isn't just the parts and the wood, it's that type of detail setup that they will give the guitar before it leaves the factory. That being said, don't let that take away from the DK24 at all. I think the DK24 is an excellent guitar. I'm glad I have it. I'm keeping it. I may even get some more of them. They're great value for what they offer. And I hope you enjoyed this kind of breakdown of the DK24 and the comparisons with the Guthrie Govan. I didn't intend for it to be a breakdown of the Guthrie Govan, but there you are. So everyone have a good day, and I'll see you soon.